Hi there, and welcome to Through Hiking Food and Nutrition. My name is Liz Snorkel Thomas. I'm a through hiker and also editor-in-chief and co-founder of Treeline Review. Treeline Review is a 100% reader-supported gear review website. Our goal is to help you buy right the first time, to save you time researching so you can spend more time outdoors. We're here because we want to make it easier to get outdoors by sharing information about gear and having panels like we have today. Our goal is to get more people outside and to have more people value nature and the planet because of that experience. You can find us at treelinereview.com or at Treeline Review on Instagram and Facebook. You can also sign up for our weekly newsletter. For now, I'd like to introduce our 4 panelists today talking about food and hiking nutrition. And first, we will start with Scott Schrumer-Williams.
Hi. I'm Scott Williams, also known as Schrumer, and I do a lot of foraging on trails, from mushrooms to wild plants to all kinds of other stuff. I've hiked the Triple Crown, the Te Araroa, New Zealand, Madagascar, the Israel Trail, and Caminos, and continue to hike. When I first did a through hike was in 2010, and I set off on the PCT without expecting to hike the whole thing. I thought I was just going to do a couple of weeks in the desert, and it was simply too wonderful to be believed, and I just couldn't stop. So that trip had no planning at all for the food. So I lived out of hiker boxes. I went to supermarkets when I could. I mailed some stuff forward, but I ate a lot of junk. And I found myself having to eat a lot of junk, like every hour on the hour. I could keep going. Made it to Canada on bars and, cheese crackers and mac and cheese, Lipton sides, all that kind of stuff. But I felt like I was malnourished when I finished. I'd lost a lot of weight, which was okay, actually. And 2 years later, I hiked the CDT with a lot of planning. I spent more time preparing food for the CDT than I did on trail. And that included tons and tons of my own freeze-dried, not freeze-dried, but dried vegetables, dried meats, and then creating from that much, much healthier meals. And on that trip, as opposed to this PCT where I had to fuel every hour with a bar or something, I could have my breakfast at 6 in the morning. I wasn't hungry until noon. Then I would have a really big meal at noon. I wasn't hungry, and this is doing 30-mile days and that kind of stuff until dinner. So the kind of foods that I ate, the amount of oil in the meal, the amount of fiber from the tons of vegetables, all of that stuff was much, much better than I'd done before. Since then, the hikes I've done, I've been close to towns, been able to come and go most of the time on the AT, the Te Araroa, New Zealand. In Madagascar, we were eating in villages, whatever they happen to have. It's much more eclectic. So I do a mix of foods, and I've drifted towards being much more vegan on trail. I've hiked with people who are vegetarian and vegan, who are some of the strongest hikers that I've ever hiked with. And I just feel it's a healthier way for me to go. But at this point, I still focus on lots and lots of dried veggies, because the fiber in dried veggies slows the absorption. So it's something you just simply can't get from Mountain House and some of the other freeze-dried, which are mostly carb-based in terms of what I look at.
Thank you so much, Schrumer. I think one of the things that we really are hoping to emphasize in this panel is hiking nutrition matters more on trail than it does at home. I think most people would say that when we're hiking, we're hungrier, and not having access to fresh food, fresh vegetables in the refrigerator makes an additional challenge for being out on the trail and eating in a way that can sustain us. And also, one of the reasons why we're having this panel is to recognize that everyone has a different style, different needs and preferences, and that they have different reasons for their goals. So no matter what your style is, we hope that you're able to try it and come away from this talk feeling inspired. Salty, can I ask you to go next?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Katie Gerber, Salty on Trail. I've hiked the PCT, CDT, Oregon Desert Trail. I did a route in the Great Basin last year, done some like shorter local hikes and some high routes. And Let's see. So we talk about sort of my food background, or how my food approach has evolved. Let's see, my first long trail was the AT, and I sort of just ate a typical hiker diet, sort of whatever was available. There wasn't really a lot of information online about like how to eat as a thru hiker, how to eat healthy as a thru hiker. So I just kind of like ate whatever was available. Didn't really feel very awesome ever. And then I hiked the PCT as a cold soaking vegetarian. And I would say I did better then. I was much more intentional about my food intake, thought about like macronutrients a little bit more. So am I getting enough protein? Am I eating healthy fats? You know, I wasn't just eating that really like carb heavy, especially like simple carb heavy meals that I was eating on the AT. So I did feel better on the PCT. And then I now eat more an omnivorous diet, and it's definitely nutrition focused, since food is like a key way that I stay healthy on trail. So I found out I had an autoimmune condition after the PCT. And at that point, I totally overhauled my diet at home to be really like anti-inflammatory and nutrient dense and whole food focused. And then when I did the CDT a few years later, my big goal was to figure out how to transfer that diet that I was eating at home onto the trail. So that's what I do now. I do a mix of cold soaking and cooking. It just kind of depends on what the weather is. But now my diet is primarily like gluten-free, mostly dairy-free. So if there's anyone on a restricted diet, I can definitely speak to that. It's not as challenging as people think it is. I do send a lot of resupply boxes to myself. I know we'll probably get to that later, but yeah, I create a lot of my meals at home now, just from like bulk freeze-dried ingredients. And I keep my meals pretty simple. I'm price aware, but I'm also willing to spend on like quality foods. So I think that kind of sums up my approach currently.
Thank you so much, Salty. Knock, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Allie Knock on Wood Gammon, and with my husband, Cliff Honeybuns Reader, I've triple crowned and then done some extra little trails along the way. And I've hiked as an omnivore, as a vegetarian, now I'm hiking as a vegan, and there's pros and cons to both, but I'm not going back. I really enjoy living the vegan life now. And part of it is what the other panelists have touched on, which is just paying attention to what you're eating. You're going to feel a lot better about yourself and make healthier choices. I went OMNI on the Appalachian Trail, which was my first long trail, because I thought, you know, I'm going to have such a hard time feeding myself if I'm not open to eating everything. And that really doesn't need to be the case. No matter what your dietary challenges, you can make a great and healthy experience while hiking. So it takes a little more planning now to hike as a vegan. But as someone who enjoys cooking and enjoys cooking at home, this is really allowed me to eat better and also really look forward to meals more. So gone are my Pop-Tarts and Spam days, and now I'm making food that I actually want to eat at the end of the day too. So most of the time, my husband and I are sharing a pot, sharing a little snow peak stove and canister, because we're hiking in the West, and so you have to use something with an on-off switch. But we also cold soak sometimes as well. So the recipes I'll talk about later today are all things that you can do cold soak with several hours of leeway, or you can cook them. And yeah, I use she, her pronouns. I'm based out of Golden, Colorado, and I'm looking forward to hopping into stuff with everyone tonight.
Thank you so much, Knock. And I'd like to bring on Virgo to discuss his eating style.
Thanks so much for having me on here, Snorkel. I really appreciate the time here to spend with you guys. Where I started in my evolution of through eating began probably with 2009, when I participated in my first annual Day Zero Pacific Crest Trail kickoff. That's where I learned about through hiking. That's where everyone met and we talked about through hiking, where people started their hike down in Campo and then went up to Canada. And from there, it just evolved into a style of how can I enjoy eating as much as I can, and thankfully, because I don't have any allergies, whatever I want. And it became the system of how do I reward myself for the time being out? How do I appreciate this time of health, of massive weight loss, of calorie burning, with a sense of fun and enjoyment for eating. And one of the things that I've really found is I will decide to, whenever I through hike any trail, I will decide to eat the two things that I abstain from while I'm not through hiking. And that is fried chicken and donuts. I don't eat them unless I'm through hiking or unless I'm giving a through hike panel discussion about through hiking and eating. So there we go. Two of my favorite things. Get to talk about it. Real quick resume, I guess, is I've done the PCT in 2012, the CDT in 2013, the Oregon Desert Trail in 2017, and then I had a kid, so now I'm on the Thru Life baby hike right now. So I got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and that is my ultimate through hike. Imagine doing a through hike the whole year, nonstop, again and again and again and again. That's my life now. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Virgo. So my next question is about the pros and cons of your particular food style. And I know we have lots of different food styles that are exhibited here, the full spectrum. So I think I will ask Shrimmer again to tell me a little bit about your food style and what are some of the pros and cons of it as you're on the trail.
Well, my food style is still pretty eclectic, just leaning toward veganism, just because I think that's healthy for me. It's healthy for the planet. And I find that I have lots of energy when I do that. I mean, for me, when I'm on trail, I'm looking for stuff to eat out there. When you get to Lake Morena, there's wild lettuces all around our campground there. There's all kinds of stuff to eat on trail. They're beautiful wild desert onions on the way in. When you get to the Sierra, there's the beautiful tall desert onions. And I mean, I've done cold soak. My CDT was all cold soak stuff that I had brought along, but it was always, the cactuses in New Mexico were fabulous. And as you go up, by the time we got to the winds, we were having porcini. Those are $100 a pound in San Francisco. And everybody I hiked with carried bags of them, the buttons that are massive and you can eat them like apples. So there's food you can learn about, and don't do mushrooms unless you know what you're doing, by the way. But if you do, it's a fabulous food. On the AT, there were chives growing out of the sidewalks as you walked into the southern towns, and great masses of leeks growing up along with the ramps and other different things. So I do a lot of supplementing wherever I am, even in Madagascar where things were unusual. You see things that are usual. New Zealand spinach in Madagascar, growing in the places. So the pros are that I get a lot of, by doing that, I get a lot of fresh veggies along with what I've brought along. And the cons are I can't always count on there being tons of food to forage. You don't know. So I do bring a meal for me. A dinner is 2 ounces of protein, 2 ounces of carbs, and it's usually a whole grain carb, 2 ounces of nuts, 2 ounces of dried fruit, and then soaked probably 5 hours. I usually start soaking way beforehand because it just gets so nice. And when you've done spaghetti sauces and things like that, they actually don't taste like fruit leather. They turn into a sauce. And you can do that kind of a meal, either cold soak or heat it up in your pot, if I brought a pot along. So I'm very eclectic. And when I'm on trails where I'm in towns all the time, I eat a whole lot of, chicken. Fried chicken is great. Donuts are great. Whatever looks good. If you're new to a long trail, is make sure you like what you're putting into your resupply. If you're doing your resupply, I've seen so many friends go out and they say, yeah, I've got this many calories and this much protein and this much, and they hate what they brought. And after the first week, they can't even look at it, let alone eat it. So make sure you like what you're bringing. Virgo's totally right. I mean, you want to have food that you really like because you do need the calories and you do need that. Oh, and also oil. I put a ton of oil in my meals, and my lunches and dinners are identical when I'm doing my own healthy foods.
Shrimmer, do you have any examples of your food with you right now?
Well, I just, not any meals made up, but we've got TVP, we've got gosari, which is a Korean delicacy. It's bracken fern that's been processed and I dry my own. We've got bags of seaweed here, cooked sweet potatoes. I'll start California wakame. If you've got a beach nearby where you can go and pick your own seaweed off the sands, that's the way to. And seaweed is a wonderful addition to a lot of things because it will rehydrate very quickly, and you get a fresh vegetable every time. So that is, and it weighs nothing. Also, go to your Asian stores because the Asian stores have lots of. In Korean food, in Japanese food, Chinese food, there are a lot of dried vegetables that are part of their cuisine. So I always start out at a 99 Ranch and go from there to a number of different places. And actually, part of what I haven't talked about, I don't know if we've got time to get into the yogurt thing. I cure my own yogurt on trail, always. My breakfast is 2 ounces of rolled grain, 2 ounces of nuts, 2 ounces of dried fruits and raisins and that sort of thing. And then my own Nido. Nido is whole fat milk powder that you can get often in the Hispanic Mexican stores. They'll have it, or you can get it online from Amazon. But I start at the beginning of a hike with a couple of tablespoons of regular yogurt. Throw in your Nido every day. I do it at dinner, actually, and roll it up. I put it in a little sandwich to keep it protected because you don't want this thing when it's full of water and Nido bursting open. Put it in a dark colored bag. If it's a sunny day, this goes on top of my pack, and the temperature that it creates is enough to cure and create yogurt. If it's a cold day, it goes in my pocket under my down jacket, and it stays at body temperature. And our body temperature is about 2 or 3 degrees lower than optimal temperatures for making yogurt. And at nighttime, put it under your armpit in your sleeping bag, put it in your crotch. People I hike with call it crotch yogurt. And, any place warm. And within 24 hours, normal yogurt takes about 8. Within 24 hours, this stuff is delicious. So every night before I get ready to soak my breakfast, this goes on it, and I start a new batch from what is left in the bag. So whatever you can't scrape out is your next thing to begin your. And I've had it go for 4 or 5 months without getting weird at all. And at about 4 to 5 months, it starts tasting a little bit like booze, and you got booze milk here. So at that point, get a clean bag and start with some fresh yogurt when you're in the next town. But fresh yogurt on trail from Nido is way tastier than just Nido.
Thank you so much, Shroomer. I'm going to bring on Nock next, and while Nock's getting ready, I just want to do a small shout out for our story on the best dehydrators, because I know there's a lot of hikers who are using dehydrated food on trail, and this time of year is the perfect time to start getting your food dehydrated if that's something you're interested in. And that story was written by Tree Hugger, who's another thru hiker and big time dehydrator. So definitely check out that story. Nock, take it away.
All right, so being me, I went way extra, and I'm going to tone it back a little bit, but welcome to my presentation, Plans to Fuel Your Adventures. Skipping ahead a little bit, I've hiked various different diets. Obviously, eating omnivorously is going to be the easiest way to do resupplies, but that has backfired on me, and I once resupplied only on Cheetos and potted meat, and I still don't know what potted meat is. So, take that with a grain of salt. Now hiking vegan and spending that time, considering what I'm going to eat, making myself healthy meals has really made me feel just more energized on trail, feeling more enthusiastic about eating as well. And low key, your poop schedule is going to be amazing, like 10 a.m. every day, 1 poop, you're done. That is a secret to the importance of eating lots of fibrous plants while on trail. But for people who are more of the junk food vegan type, you might be thinking, oh, well, I have to give up all my favorite foods. But this is your moment. So you can have Sour Patch Kids, Fritos, Oreos, peanut butter pretzels, most Cliff bars, Lar bars, Fritos, spicy sweet chili Doritos, Swedish fish, Nutter Butters, potato chips, soy jerky, Thin Mints, original Pringles. And yeah, the world is your oyster mushroom if you want to be a junk food vegan on trail. You just gotta, I mean, between Swedish fish and Oreos, you got the calories right there. But I'll tell you my secret for being a healthy on-trail vegan, and it is Punjabi food. So most stalls, rajma, chana, a lot of types of sabzi. I'm working on a palak paneer with tofu recipe. These all, A, become vegan really easily, and B, dehydrate and rehydrate really easily. And I've done these both with a long cold soak of like 4 to 5 hours, 6 if you have the time, like fill it up at lunch and then eat it later. Or you could also do it in a cook pot. And honestly, obviously hot food is more tasty and better. So I know what you're saying, but nah, I'm not Punjabi, it's okay, nobody's perfect. This is a great cookbook. It's Vegan Risha's Indian Kitchen, and she's not paying me, but just for your life, this is a great cookbook to have on hand, and I cook stuff out of here all the time. And so a couple of my secret tips for once you've made your Indian food. Only use canned tomatoes. For some reason, tomato skins turn into pointy little spears when you dehydrate them. So whatever you do, if you're making spaghetti sauce, use canned tomatoes so you don't have the skin attached. You'll also want to avoid things like corn or carrots that haven't already been cooked before dehydration. They just rehydrate a lot faster if they've been cooked. I have also noticed that food that I enjoyed eating and then dehydrated, in the front country is a lot spicier to me in the back country, and I have no idea why. So just being a little gentler on your palate and making your food a little bit less spicy in the front country will help you out there. And the number one thing is if you're cooking with beans and you're going to dehydrate it, make sure you get all their skins broken apart. You can use an immersion blender or blend it, mash it. You can overcook it so everything ruptures, but making sure you don't have hard little beans stuck in your rehydrated food later is going to really go a long way for making you happy. And you want to complete the protein by having a carb alongside all your beans. So wrapping it in a tortilla or making some like instant rice to go with it is a good way just to get a whole meal. Oh, and always I have on hand olive oil, hot pepper flakes, and garlic salt. Those are my main cooking staples as well.
Thank you so much, Nock. Salty, I'll let you take it away. And actually, while we have Salty on, Salty wrote our collagen powder story and also our electrolyte story and our whey protein story, and knows a lot about different supplements that thru-hikers might want. So I will drop all of those stories in the chat, and I'm sure Salty will be talking about some of those supplemental powders that she uses.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so let's see. So one thing I want to mention first is I wanted to follow up on something Schumer said, which is making sure, and what Virgo mentioned, of making sure you like the food that you eat on trail. I think that's huge, making sure to include a lot of variety and foods that are going to be appealing to you. So that's something I'm always thinking about when I pick out food. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, when I'm thinking about picking out food, I'm focusing on things that are going to support my health. So what I think about is just like a mostly whole food, like anti-inflammatory diet as much as possible on trail, which is kind of challenging on trail, but I'll make a lot of my meals at home from freeze-dried meats or like freeze-dried or dehydrated veggies. Like Snorkel was saying, I do use like protein powders and things like that. I have a smoothie mix, this weird brown bag of powders that has, and I can drop a link for that afterwards, but it has like greens powder, coconut milk powder, protein powder, and then it has some like adaptogens in here, which are good for sports recovery. There's like cordyceps mushrooms and some anti-inflammatory spices in here. So there's cinnamon and ginger and a little bit of sea salt for electrolytes as well. So that's sort of a breakfast staple for me. And then let's see what else. Yeah, I usually cook, if I cook at all, I'm cooking one meal a day, and that might be dinner, but often I'm cold soaking. So a lot of times I'll take meals that can be either cold soaked or be eaten hot. Yeah, and I'm just looking for foods that have sort of like as simple of ingredient list as possible. And the pros of that are that it keeps me feeling strong and energetic. I recover well from day to day. And then I guess the cons would be that it takes a little more preparation to gather those ingredients and prepare them ahead of time and to send those in resupply boxes. I don't do a lot of my own dehydrating at home because it's not really something that I enjoy. But what I will do is like source bulk dehydrated ingredients and combine them into meals at home. And that's keeps it pretty simple and easy for me. Yeah, and I can share some of the meals that I eat. I don't have a lot of the meals with me, but some of the snacks. Well, one thing I eat a lot of is like these nut butter packets. So that's pretty easy and simple. One ingredient usually. And something I will mention is I think a lot about my macronutrients. So I'm often thinking about creating like blood sugar balanced meals. And by that, I mean, including like enough protein, a healthy fat, and a healthy carbohydrate in there, because that keeps my energy steady throughout the day. So I won't start the day with like a super high carb, high sugar breakfast, because then that spikes my insulin and my energy is sort of like that all day. And rather, I'll start my day with something that's like more protein based and fat based, and that keeps me feeling really good all day. And then I do get a lot of fiber from dehydrated veggies, as Ali mentioned, as Virgo mentioned as well. So bars, here's a couple I eat, and I'm looking for things that have like a decent amount of protein. You can't really see them. This is called No Cow Bar. It's vegan. It's a Kind bar, a protein Cliff bar. I'm looking for, again, as most of us hikers know, like greater than 100 or 125 calories per ounce in my bars. And with bars, I'm often looking for ones that have like 10 or more grams of protein. So that makes me feel good. Maybe a sugar-free jerky. And then for dinner, this is like a polenta and dehydrated veggies dinner. I would add olive oil to this, maybe some pine nuts, maybe some Parmesan cheese to this, probably a source of protein, whether it's like jerky or something like that. There's a good old beans and rice dinner. I would probably eat that with corn chips, taco seasoning. And then, yeah, I do pay a lot of attention to things like electrolytes. So this is LMNT. It's my favorite electrolyte. And then I have this other one that's like a vitamin C packet. I'll add that to water pretty frequently. And that sort of like is a form of nutritional insurance, because I know that I'm probably not meeting all my nutritional bases. So I try to include like a multivitamin or electrolytes or supplements or things like that. So yeah, those are some of my staples.
Thank you so much, Salty. And next, Virgo.
Thank you. So I wish I could do all of that macronutrient, like let's figure out how I can make myself healthy, which I think we're all out there being healthy. We're out walking, getting fresh air, putting a lot of energy expenditure out there. And then again, it comes down for me, what I love to eat. And I have gone through a process from starting off as a thru hiker, as a wannabe thru hiker, to becoming a thru hiker, to then doing massive thru hiking and just loving it, to evolve to what my menu is. And it's really basic. Thankfully, I am a person who loves just repetitiveness and will eat the same thing every day for months on end. So without going into all of the different styles and things that I like, I'll make it as simple as I can for you guys for what personally I eat. And I brought my bag, and it's a simple idea of pulling your bag into 4 different sections. First bag is just breakfast, right? My breakfast always go to, and always a Ziploc, is an oatmeal pack. It's simple, it's cheap. Every grocery store practically has some form of organic or non-organic, whatever. You open it up, you can pour the liquid in the bag, and you can eat it straight from the bag, throw it away. Really simple. Now, the alternative to that, if I don't want to sit there and cook, because people want to just get up and go, I don't, I like to cook. I found that these Velveeta bars are great. They have good energy. 4 of them, they get me going, because most of my day is just eating bars and snacks. So after breakfast, I have a snack pack that's not in my bag, that's usually in my backpack, and that consists of Fritos, these fried corn curls. You know what they are? They're amazing. That's my salty. Here's my sweet, Lucky Charms. Right? And then I go through a series of drinking energy drinks. I usually do some kind of, what is this? Energy drink. You got to look for the word energy on these things. And this one is called Wild Blackberry Pomegranate. Amazing, I think. I have moved to when there's bigger days, harder days, desert days where you really need electrolytes. I have moved to these None, mispronouncing them, but these are amazing. Don't carry them in your pouch and walk through rivers because it will get wet and then you've lost all your nuns. And these are expensive. And then bars for the snacks. Here's a bar that I like to eat. And the reason why I like this bar is because, oh, it's upside down. Is because it has protein in it. But the way I look at my bars is, do I want a crunchy bar or do I want a bar that's slathered in chocolate? And I oscillate between the two. So sometimes I want a crunchy bar, no chocolate. Sometimes I want slathered in chocolate bar. Lunch, real basic. My favorite go-to lunch is real simple. Pizza on the trail. Pepperoni. String cheese. Tortilla. And that's it. Now, and then on a side note, the great thing about tortillas is when you got to put your trash somewhere. These tortilla bags, when you're done, are the best storage of trashes because because when you seal it up, it is completely scent proof. Like you can kind of smell some stuff, but not really. Lastly, so that's the 3 packs, breakfast, lunch. The last one is dinner. Without going into all of my dinner choices of such as like, your typical ramen, your typical, oh, I've got some gravy mix, throw that in there. Your typical mashed potatoes, Idahoan, what I have done, and I know a lot of people won't believe this. I don't believe it. I'm the one saying it, but I eat every time I thru-hike, whenever I thru-hike, the same meal every night because I love it. I even eat this when I'm at home and my wife will be like, hey, do you want to have trail food tonight? I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Let's do this. And this is what it is. It's so basic. It's Knorr pasta sides with some chunk light tuna, Fritos on top or Pringles or some crackers or some oil or whatever. But that's it because I love a casserole and a casserole in the trail is amazing. On trail is amazing. So that's basically my style of eating. I know it's not the healthiest, but it is affordable. It is available in most towns. I do shop in town a lot. And then the only difference is when I first started thru-hike, depending on the thru-hike, I will send myself the first 2 weeks, if not month of food. So I don't have to think about anything except getting in shape for hiking. And after a month, that's when the hiker hunger starts setting in. That's probably when I start feeling I don't want to eat this stuff again anymore. And I'll start buying food. And so after a month, I just start going into town and buying what I want, when I want, how I want it, and as much as I want. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Diego. That's actually a really great segue to, this was a question that we're going to answer later, but I think is really, really interesting. And that's, how does the way that you eat impact your resupply? How do you mail yourself boxes? Do you eat in town? Virgo told us a little bit about what he does. Shermer, why don't you tell us what you do?
It depends on where I'm hiking because the trails are so different. On the PCT, like I say, I was going with whatever I could find because I hadn't planned that at all. The CDT was 28 food boxes. At that point, I was eating an extremely healthy diet actually at home, and I wanted to continue that. And that meant drying and creating, I dry ingredients, proteins, vegetables, all that stuff. Add in basic, brown rice or potatoes, any other basic starch, and then cold soaked on that one, which meant that everything was packed in, Ziplocs of some kind. And Ziplocs tend to get little punctures in them. And so I wanted, actually, I'm going into gear. This is one of your basic pieces of gear. So you don't mess up your backpack and everything. is a heavy duty bag left over from a Kathmandu curry or anything else to put your Ziploc in so it doesn't trash your sleeping bag or your pack and all that kind of stuff. But let's see. In terms of the trails, though, that one was the CDT was 28 food boxes I mailed to myself. The AT, you're in towns, every other day. So I did a mix of mailing healthy stuff to myself and buying fresh food. On the Te Araroa in New Zealand, we were in little towns. I bought fresh food. We were actually cooking potatoes and different things on trail. Sweet potatoes, lots of greens. Actually, there were a lot of stuff we could forage in New Zealand as well. So a lot has to do with the trail. I try to stay to a healthy, what to me is healthy, which is that kind of equal base of protein, carbs, vegetables, and a lot of oil in it. Gosh, yeah, depends on where I'm hiking. I can go in a lot of different directions with that. I've been pure on some trails, but I'm not really good at being completely pure. So even though I'm going towards veganism, I'll eat a hamburger in town.
Quick question, Schumer. Do you carry a stove? What sort of cooking gear do you bring? Do you have
It
it?
depends. On the CDT, this was my stove. I mean, you put your Ziploc in there and let it rehydrate because we didn't bring a stove at all. We wanted to go as fast as we could. But when I was traveling on the AT or in Madagascar, New Zealand, all those places, I bring a titanium pot in a pot cozy. And a pot cozy, if you don't have one, is one of the most important pieces of gear you can have. It's, half an ounce, quarter of an ounce of Mylar insulation used, and then tape around the just boxing tape to the size of your pot. You can bring water to a boil, put your food in it, and set it aside while you pitch your camp and everything else. And it will stay at boiling for 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, depends on the outside temperature. So you save tons and tons of fuel. I always carry a small one. My stove that I bring is a BRS. They used to be $12 each, and actually I've used this all over the world. It's so tiny and it's so small. And you just have, the only thing about this one is if you use it at full bore, it will tend to warp your little stand. So don't use it full bore, but even backed off from full bore, it works fine. And Mylar insulation you can buy anywhere in a hardware store and do that. In terms of other gear, always a long-handled titanium spoon, because getting in and out of bags with a short one means that your hand gets full of your dinner. And one pair of chopsticks, because ramen just doesn't work without chopsticks. You got to get it out with something. And I do carry a knife because I do a lot of foraging. And you want to cut up mushrooms, you need a decent sized blade, or cut up leeks or whatever you happen to find. So I started out with a little teeny blade, and they're so useless for even cutting cheese that you might as well not carry it. So I carry an Opinel, which is got a very light wooden handle. The whole thing is extremely light, but it's a real knife. And that's because I actually do a lot of real food on trail.
Salty, can you share with us next? And also, I want to ask you about coffee, because I know that you do coffee in the morning, and that's something that's very important to me. And if we're going to be talking about stoves, I want to know about coffee.
Yes, yeah. So as far as resupply strategy, similar to Schumer, it depends on the trail for me. So on a trail like the Oregon Desert Trail, where you're going through a lot of like really tiny towns that don't have, well, not all of them. There's a couple that have really good resupply options, but on something like maybe the Great Basin Trail that we did, where there's just a lot of tiny towns that don't have a lot of options, I'll send boxes to a lot of those places because it's important to me to have the foods that make me feel my best. Whereas on a trail like the PCT, I would do a mixed resupply strategy where I would send boxes to places that didn't have really good resupply options, good grocery options, and then just resupply in town at the places that did have really good grocery stores to shop at. And that ensured I had like a nice amount of variety. And what I like about resupply boxes, like I kind of like front loading all of the prep. Like I actually enjoy that. It gets me excited for the hike. I enjoy making all my food up, and then it helps me just not waste time when I'm in town with like going grocery shopping, because it's actually kind of like a stressful experience for me to like go into a foreign grocery store and be like, where do I find the things that I want? So like on the CDT, where I wanted to finish my hike in less than 100 days, I knew I wanted to be moving pretty quickly, like in and out of towns. So I sent a lot of boxes on that trail. So I would walk into town, grab my box, maybe stay the night, but sometimes I would just walk into town, grab my box, go to a cafe, eat some food, eat some real food, and then leave that evening or something like that. So the resupply boxes made it easier and quicker to get in and out of towns more quickly, though it did take more time before the hike to get ready for things. As far as my cooking setup, if I have one, well, I'll start, if I'm not cooking, this is my setup. It's just a jar that I cold soak things in. It's a peanut butter jar that I eat the peanut butter, and then now I have the jar. And then as far as my cooking setup, I have a Tokes alcohol siphon stove. So it's this. This is the pot stand that goes around it, windscreen that goes with that, and then pot goes on top of that. Super simple, very light. And then this is just like a Tokes 750 milliliter pot. I too am a fan of the long handled spoon. That's my only eating utensil. I carry a little knife as well to chop up any fresh food that I brought, avocado, onions, things like that, garlic that I like to add. That is something I like to do, even if when I'm going through a town, even if I have a resupply box there, I do like to grab some fresh stuff to pack out, like some heartier veggies like carrots or spinach greens pack out well, avocado protected inside the cook pot so it doesn't smash inside my pack. I think that covers it. And coffee, yes, I do love coffee, which is one reason that motivates me to bring a stove on trail, is if nothing else to have warm coffee. Some of my favorites, like I like Kusa coffee is a good one. And then there is, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. It starts with an H, but there's another brand of coffee that I don't remember the name, but it's a good instant coffee as well. But yeah, I don't know what you want to know about coffee, but I'm a fan as well, Snorkel.
Thanks so much, Salty. And yeah, I also carry a stove for the coffee.
What kind do you like?
Yeah, I think someone mentioned in the chat Alpine Star, and I'm a pretty big fan of.
Alpine Start?
I think they're pretty local to you in Colorado, right?
I think so. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, Virgo, I would love to hear about you told us a little about your resupply strategy, but can you briefly tell us about the gear you carry to cook your food?
Yeah, sure thing. One thing on the resupply too is that I learned is that when you know that there's a town coming up that doesn't have a supermarket, and you're in a town 100 miles to even 200 miles, maybe even 3 weeks before you're going to get there, I'll go buy a resupply for that town in a town 200 miles before I get there and send it there. So it's not something that I bought 4 months before I got there and it's sat in a box for 4 months waiting for me to get there. It's only been 2 weeks, and it's something that I know that I've been wanting now, or that I'm going to want, like I think I'm going to want 2 weeks from now. So that's one resupply strategy that I discovered that I can do when I'm out there. So my setup in terms of eating and gear is a pot koozie for sure. This enables me to cook sometime out here. This enables me to cook with less fuel generated because I can cook it and then just let it sit in here. This pot has been with me for my entire career of, I guess, lifetime of hiking long trails. It was given to me in 2010 by a friend. It's through REI, but it's basically an Evernew pot, titanium Evernew pot. This is a Soto Windmaster stove. I found that this is probably the fastest burning for my pot. It's wide, it has a nice stand. I don't even need a wind guard for it. The biggest thing that I find in cleaning that a lot of people will use are these little green sponges. They'll, you can scrub out all your dirty stuff, all your dirty food, and clean it up real nice. I am a big coffee drinker too. I will choose to do these Vias little packets. You can get them at Costco. They're on sale right now. I don't have stock in it, but I should because it's really delicious. One bit of advice that I learned while on trail is while I was in, where was it? Lone Pine. I had this really crappy coffee mug, and a friend of mine said, "You need to get a double wall. Your coffee's getting too cold." I went and got this double walled mug. It's like $30, and it's been with me the whole time now, and it keeps my coffee nice and warm for a long time. That I've tried other things. I've tried alcohol stoves. You know, that's works fine. I've kind of had the one like Salty has. I got this out of a hiker box, in fact, and I tried this for a little bit. I don't mind alcohol so much. You got to carry liquid. You got to worry about fires. It's not, you can't use it in California, from what I hear now, because of fire danger and everything. It becomes a little bit more risky. So I like the Soto Windmaster and the fuel. Sometimes I'll get the little one. Sometimes I'll get the big one, depending on how much I got to pack out. So that's pretty much it. I mean, a spoon is a spoon is a spoon. You get a wood spoon, you get a bamboo spoon, you get a metal spoon. I'll use whatever I need. I have watched a guy once lose his spoon, and he had to do, I won't name him, Trip. He lost his spoon and he had to use a stick to eat his food. I offered him my spoon. I said, "Hey, dude, like, let me eat my food and I'll give you this." He's like, "No, mate, I got this." He's a saucy New Zealander. He's a saucy Kiwi, and he just went for it. So,
Thank you so much, Virgo, for sharing that. And Knock, can we hear about your resupply strategy and also any sort of gear that the food that you use requires?
Sure, yeah. Shout out to Honeybuds for just bringing all my show and tell in. I appreciate it. But for gear, we are always together. We eat all the meals together. So we share one. This is a Vargo bot. So it's got this like little gasket, so you can seal it up and mix it while you're cooking it. So you have like a waterproof seal on there, which is nice. And I'm going to actually disagree with you, Virgo. I'm a big fan of this spoon. And so Honeybuds is team long spoon. We get a lot of use out of the long spoon, but I found this at Forester Pass, and shout out to whoever's brilliant idea this was. But it's a titanium Sea to Summit spoon, but they took one of those tiny little like icing spatulas, popped it off the wood bit and super glued it on here. And it makes getting down into the pot to like clean it out so much better. So you don't have to be like digging and trying to clean out your pot with a little like sponge. And as someone who doesn't like getting, stuff on my hand while I'm trying to clean the pot, big fan of whoever's spoon invention this is. Someone patented it. It's a great idea. And for resupply strategy, yeah, pretty much what everyone else said as well. I do for smaller towns, we'll be sending like a full resupply and try to roughly map out how many days that will be in advance, and then, send everything I'll need. But in like a larger town, I'll leave room to like supplement with like fun snack foods that are available at grocery stores or like fancy chocolate bars. And then, just like Salty said, bringing out some fresh veg will really elevate meals as well. Love her idea about the avocado packing out, and the one little asterisk I'll add is buy it a little bit underripe, because it does freshen up if you're storing it in the pot a little bit faster than you would expect. So if you get it a little underripe, by the time you're ready to put it in your dinner, it'll be a little bit more ripened.
Thanks so much, Knock. And to finish off this section before we jump into Q&A, can we get your quick, like 10-second answer to what your favorite food or recipe is? And also feel free to drop some recipe ideas, all of you. I know Salty dropped a recipe idea in the chat. We would love to share them with people who are on this call.
My favorite is breakfast. I never, ever got tired of it. It's rolled grains. I learned it from a Swiss mountaineer that I hiked with on the PCT, Smiles. She was vegetarian and one of the strongest hikers I've ever hiked with. And but breakfast was it's 2 ounces of a mix of rolled grains. They're whole grains, from barley and wheat and oats, and then 2 ounces of nuts, 2 ounces of dried fruit, and then the homemade yogurt. And that, it just in the morning is such a lovely mix, and it's so full of fiber and the fat from the nido that it stays with me. I can eat that at 6 in the morning and I'm not hungry until noon. And it's if you do 2 ounces of all those different things, it's a massive breakfast. It's big.
Yes. So I shared my smoothie recipe for breakfast, which is what I love to do for breakfast. And so my favorite snack is sweet potato chips and almond butter, often together, which sounds weird and bizarre and like you would not be able to open your mouth, but it's delicious. And dinner, I think currently it changes, but currently I think that polenta dinner I shared with like the roasted red peppers, the olive oil, the Parmesan, some pine nuts in there, I think is wonderful. So yeah, I keep it pretty simple.
Thanks so much, Salty. Virgo.
Again, my favorite meal is dinner, the Knorr pasta sides with the tuna. I get really bummed when I have to dry camp and I can't have it that night because I will save my water for my oatmeal and my coffee in the morning. So I have that. And then I won't eat my dinner at night because it requires water. And instead I'll eat my lunch, which is the pepperoni pizza tortilla wrap. And then I'll have to wait for my dinner for lunch the next morning when I get to the next water source. And then I eat it then. So obviously dinner is my favorite. Sometimes I'll have for dinner, sometimes I'll have for lunch. Depends.
Thank you so much, Virgo. And Knock, I know that you have a very inspiring meal. So take it away.
I sure am. Yeah, I'm very passionate about our breakfast. We call it Super Breakfast. Thanks to our AT Buddy Scout for this. 2 oatmeal packets, Carnation Instant or breakfast essentials. Check and make sure those are vegan, but everyone we've tried has been. Instant coffee, whatever kind of add-ons like chia, hemp, flax, brown sugar, whatever you want. Put it in a Ziploc bag when you're in town or when you're preparing your resupplies, and then dump it in a Gatorade bottle, shake it up, and drink it while you walk if you want to get out of the door quickly. You might be thinking that sounds gross, and it is a little bit gross, but it gives you a ton of energy. And if you heat it up, it actually tastes pretty dang good. So for lunches and snacks, we do like a snack lunch situation with all sorts of different healthy and unhealthy foods. This was actually from a Jupiter video, but the primal jerkies are super good if you're having like a something craving while you're hiking. Big fan of these. And for some dinners that don't require advanced dehydrating or prepping or anything, Fritos and dehydrated instant refried beans plus whatever veg you have on hand. This is like the staple and I've never got bored of them. They make dehydrated hummus, which is not as good as real hummus, but it's dehydrated, and dehydrated tabbouleh. You can mix those up in a wrap as well. I love couscous with sun-dried tomatoes and pine nuts, which you can like grab from the like salad section of a grocery store. You might want to follow that up for a little more protein with like a big bite of peanut butter afterwards, but it makes for a good hot dinner. And you can still do a ramen bomb if you use the soy sauce style ramen and then get that real gut sticking to you kind of meal. It is a packet of ramen and a packet of mashed potatoes. Make sure you're looking for dairy in the mashed potato packets. So some of them have them, some of them.
And I will let my co-founder, Naomi, take it away, who has been diligently looking at the chat and collecting questions for our participants.
A question for Shroomer. You talked about cold soaking. How exactly do you do that? How do you cold soak?
Well, I put together a meal that could be a chili meal or curry or anything like that, all the different things I was talking about. I put it in a Ziploc. Well, the size that's smaller than this, I don't have any of them made up right now. I just have ingredients. Like this is beets. I actually do a lot of borscht on trail. I love cooked beets. I do a mix of cooked and uncooked. The uncooked take longer to rehydrate, but I always start rehydrating my dinner after I've had my lunch. And so I give my rehydrating a good 4 or 5 hours. But I will then, if this was the dinner, I would put water to cover this at noon and then put it inside something that's going to protect it because I don't want it breaking open in my pack. And often there's little pinholes in these things that have been created by having been packed, and let it soak. And that's just, if I have a stove, I will then heat it up at night and have something hot. If I don't, it's ready to go. All the foods that I make the meals that I put together that somebody else didn't make are always cold soakable. And it's very, very simple. Actually, just soak them.
Cool. And one other question for you, Shroomer. Do you have any concerns about harvesting wild foods? Do you have any tips?
Absolutely. Don't wild harvest anything that is rare in the area you're hiking in. because it's just not fair to the other hikers. It's not fair to the environment. What I harvest are things that there are lots of. When you're in the high Sierra, you go through meadows that are just solid onions. In the deserts, you can get areas that are just solid onions, or places where the cactuses are so plentiful. I never harvest a flower near a trail because it's just not fair to other people. So I'll wander off, somewhere when there's lots of stuff. In terms of mushrooms, that's different. I'll pick a mushroom anytime it's there because it's going to turn to mush by the next day or a couple of days later. It's just simply, and certain mushrooms like chanterelles aren't even eaten by deer. They're not eaten by worms. They're not eaten by anything. Porcini, you're up against the hogs, the deer, everything. Everybody loves porcini, but they're so good that I will pick them. In terms of picking mushrooms, I mean, you really have to join a mycological society. Don't learn mushrooming from a book. Get out with people. Matter of fact, I met the person that I hiked the CDT with, Nancy Wynot, that you guys know, because she asked me to take her out mushrooming. That's the way to learn, something like that. And it's the same thing with the gosari. We know that fern fronds are edible, but they're not edible unless they're processed, and they're poisonous before they're processed, just like acorns are poisonous before they're processed. And it's a very simple process, and then I dry them. But you do need to look into what you're doing if you're picking wild plants. Absolutely. You should know what you're doing and have an ethical feel for it in terms of, I just simply don't pick anything. There are certain wildflowers that have beautiful, wonderful bulbs, delicious, wonderful bulbs. I don't dig them up. It's just to destroy those beautiful flowers is just too much. It's not worth a little bit of carb.
And one more question for you, Schumer. Sorry to put you on the spot. What's your yogurt recipe with Nido again? Could you repeat that?
Sure. Well, the main thing is getting the whole setup, because it's how much you want to make. I have this is a giant Nido thing friend got on sale. I usually get the smaller cans, and I put one can unopened into each resupply box, or try and buy them. One can is about enough for a week for me, of the smaller Nido cans. And what you do is you have a little bit of yogurt left in your Ziploc, and I will put probably half a cup to a cup, depending on how big a breakfast I want. I really do it just by each evening, and then I mix it in. I kind of squish it all around with enough water to make it liquid, but not terribly runny. Then I fold it in a little bit of Mylar, and that's to hold temperature, and it's also to protect it. You don't want it breaking open in your sleeping bag when you've got it in your armpit. It would really mess things up. And then I double bag it by putting it in a dark colored little bag that I made. And that, like I say, can go on top of your pack in the sun to warm it. And I've never had it get too warm that it killed the yogurt culture. But it's a delicious way to have breakfast with fresh yogurt every day. And I think that I haven't done it yet, but I think that would be easily done with protein powders. It doesn't have to be Nido, because I make yogurt at home from protein powders and from oat milk and a lot of other things like that. I make my own yogurt at home, but I haven't actually done that on trail. So I'm still using Nido. I've got these big cans.
I'm inspired, Schumer. I may have to try that myself. Do any of you have any good sources for dehydrated veggies that you're adding to your meals? Do you have a go-to source, or do you do it yourself?
I do it myself. Basically, I find that they're very expensive to buy, and they're simply not as good as home dehydrated veggies. I can't get dried beets. I can't get dried sweet potatoes of the quality that I like to eat. And my meals are absolutely delicious. I don't get tired of my cold soaked meals. They're quite good.
So you find that your own dehydrated vegetables, do they actually taste better than the commercially available ones,
so.
do you think?
I think because they're usually fresher. You've made them within a couple months. They're not sitting around for a year or more or whatever. I mean, if you're getting freeze-dried vegetables, that's different. Freeze-dried vegetables can be really fresh tasting. And I don't have a freeze dryer. I mean, that's an expensive piece of equipment. I have a homemade mushroom dryer that a mushroom friend of mine gave me years ago. It's about as big as a refrigerator. So I can load that thing with pounds and pounds of stuff and do a lot quickly. But, tomato sauces, I'll just buy canned tomato sauces. You're absolutely right. Canned tomatoes, the way to go. And the sauces or, chunked up tomatoes, and I put them on parchment paper, put them in there, dry them till they're beyond fruit leather, till they're actually crisp and crackly. And that stuff will rehydrate just like a spaghetti sauce. It's just delicious. So,
Do you cook the vegetables before you dehydrate them?
I do some, I cook some, and carrots, I always do uncooked. They rehydrate fine. I slice them thin. But sweet potatoes, I do both fresh and cooked. Beets, I do fresh and cooked. I find that the main thing is giving them enough time to rehydrate, because you're totally right, Ellie, that it takes a lot longer for the stuff that hasn't been cooked to rehydrate. But I'm giving it 4 or 5 hours, and I'm carrying a little bit of extra water that way, water weight, but it's just worth it. I get into a rhythm. At each meal, I put water on the next meal's food, and it starts to soak then for 4 or 5 hours. And then it's really tender and quite nice.
Excellent. Salty, do you have any good whey protein recommendations?
Yeah, we tested quite a few for our protein powder story. I would definitely suggest people check that out, because there's not just whey protein powder there, but plant-based as well. And there's lots of good options there. But I would say J. Rob, there's a grass-fed whey that protein powder that company has that I thought was good. And then I believe one called Tara's Whey that I think is also a good one. And there's probably a couple other good ones linked in the story that I'm not remembering the name of right now. So yeah, I would check out that.
Do any of you have any tips on carrying olive oil without it getting all over your pack? I mean, obviously you can buy the little mini ones, but do any of you carry like 2 ounces or more of olive oil?
I'll chime in. For the trips that I guide for Skirka, we use like the hard-sided Nalgene containers for our olive oil, and those work really well as well, because they can't be like crunched either. And I think Schumer's tip of putting it inside another bag, great idea.
I'll just start. I start the first few weeks with this much olive oil, a very small thing. And by about 3 weeks in, as the hiker hunger starts to, then I've got twice this, and then I'll even go to larger than that. Olive oil is the lightest weight calorie you can get. It's just packed. So other folks.
Has it ever spilled in your pack?
I always have it in a Ziploc. I do not ever have it like that. It's always double bagged in a Ziploc, because it would be disaster.
Yeah, it would be. Virgo, how do you carry fried chicken and donuts on trail?
Usually in my belly, because I will eat it in town and I will bring it on trail in my belly. But with that said, as much as the crappy menu that I eat out on trail, Schrumer was right about the olive oil. That is the densest calorie, and it's the lightest weight for the most calories you can get on trail. And in doing all this research, when Snorkel said, "Hey, you want to be a part of this?" Started looking online a little bit, and I found this place called Gear Skeptic on YouTube. This guy put together an amazing array of everything that we eat. You name it, honey buns to like moon cheese. He lists every nutrient in, or not nutrient, every gram per weight ratio that you can get, and it's a phenomenal resource if you're into, hey, how can I eat the lightest thing, the most calories, and the lightest thing, and then what do I do? What do I eat, and where does that fall in lightweight, super lightweight, ultra lightweight, or just heavy? It's an amazing resource. It behooves me to mention this because everyone hears about food, and this spreadsheet that he has that you can download is amazing. Again, it's called Gear Skeptic on YouTube.
Anyone have some favorite cold soaking recipes that don't involve dehydrators or mailing boxes? So in other words, just cold soaking food that you can buy in town.
I love couscous with sun-dried tomatoes and pine nuts is one option. And you could throw other stuff in there, like maybe get some green onions as well, might be nice. And if you're in the Southwest, you'll find dehydrated refried beans in a lot of grocery stores in the bean aisle. And those with some chips or Fritos are delicious. And then that's another one where you can build up and add whatever kind of toppings you want to do.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else?
I can put my breakfasts together easily in any town. Absolutely. But long as I've got some kind of powdered milk, I can continue it on.
And you don't cook that. That's cold soap.
Always cold soap.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate lighting a stove in the morning. I know coffee is great. This was always my coffee cup, just the bottom of a water bottle. And then I hiked the Israel Trail. And oh my God, every day at about 9 o'clock in the morning, everybody just sits down on trail, whoever's hiking, and they brew up fabulous, Greek, Turkish, Israeli coffee. and they would give you, anybody walking by, and finally the guy said, I can't give you this wonderful coffee in that piece of plastic. And he gave me a glass shot glass, which I then carried in my plastic all the rest of the Israeli Trail, because it wouldn't insult people to hand a glass to them. But I loved that coffee. That was absolute ambrosia.
Sounds amazing.
I've dabbled in cold soak before, but it just takes too long for me. There's a lot of prep for it. I don't always nail it, but what I consider a soak for me is a mountain house. And that takes, you have to put in the water and then you have to wait 10 minutes. Oh, that 10 minutes of waiting just sucks. But I want to do a fair warning about mountain house. I'd like to play a little video for you to share a little warning about mountain house.
What y'all have for dinner? Mountain house? Me too.
So yeah, fair warning.
Yeah, I thank you, Virgo. I think I've probably experienced that myself. I'm sure many of us can relate to that video.
It's a very hiker trash moment. It's a very hiker trash meal. So. Yeah.
Question about gluten-free pasta. Anyone have recommendations for that?
I posted in there. I like rice noodles, but I can't remember the brand name that I used. But as far as like a gluten-free pasta, there are bean pastas out there. I don't have any brand recommendations, and I haven't tried it, but I would probably start there.
Yeah, I've actually tried some of those, like chickpea pasta, and it's actually pretty good. And you're getting more protein, but you get that sort of pasta fix that you're looking for.
Costco has a brown rice noodle ramen type thing that I love. Absolutely delicious. Takes a little bit longer to cook than regular ramen, but not with a pot cozy. You just let it sit until it's nice. But it's brown rice and it is really good. Any
recommendation on how often to hydrate, or do you just drink when you're thirsty or drink when you're at a water source?
Water source or when thirsty. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I camel up.
Yeah, I was going to say that's that phrase of cameling up. You get to a water source, just drink as much as you can at that source, pack accordingly on how you hydrate. And if I don't need a lot of water when I hike, luckily, and so I don't have to pack a lot. Some other people have to pack a lot of water. So the more you drink, the less you have to carry. So definitely camel up.
I think I'm like the weird through hiker where as soon as I resupply, as soon as I hit a water source, I'm immediately mentally managing my list of what my resources are for the next one. I ran out of water once and like went to a dark place very quickly and like never want to go back there again. So yeah, I always make sure that I have an extra half liter of water than what I think I'll need. And then you also have situations where you're like, oh shoot, I have to dry camp then you have a little more water for your dinner too.
Oh, what is dry camp?
Dry camp is when you get to your night spot and there isn't water available at that place, or it's very far from where you are. So there isn't an ability to just go down, get your water and start cooking where you have a plethora of it. And you can wake up the next morning, have more water, start your day with taking from the stream. Instead, you've walked maybe 5, 10, hopefully not more than that, miles to get there. And you have maybe another 2 or 3 or 4, maybe even 10 more miles to the next water source. So you're right in between, you're in a dry spot between 2 sources of water that you're hiking toward. And you have to just really be careful of how much you consume at that time, because you may not, the spot you may get to 5 miles from there might be dry too. So you have to go to the next one. So you just have to kind of weigh those resources out there. So.
This has been a really, really great talk, and I'm grateful for everyone here for sharing their different perspectives. And thank you everyone who tuned in. Thanks again for everyone who was able to join us and to the panelists. And we hope to see you again at another Treeline Review event.